At this point, it gives me very great pleasure to make welcome on stage the moderator for this fireside chat. It is my pleasure to invite the Managing Director and Head of West Africa at JP Morgan, Mr. Dapo Olagunju. Give him a round of applause as he comes up stage to receive his guest for this conversation. Please sustain the applause till he gets up stage. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, sir. We're truly honored to have you here. And now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure to have one of the most influential leaders in global finance here in the room. Please join me as I make welcome the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. A round of applause. Sustain that applause till he gets to his seat. Such an incredible honor to have you at the 30th Nigerian Economic Summit. Thank you very much. Over to you, our moderator.
A big thank you to our lady MC, Mojibade. It's so pleasant to see that you have now become arguably the most influential compare for business events in Nigeria. But ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome one of the most influential personalities in global finance, Jamie Dimon, who is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of JP Morgan Chase. Under his leadership, JP Morgan has become the largest bank in the United States and one of the most successful businesses of any kind globally. Jamie's expertise and insight on the economy, the financial markets, and on leadership have made him a sought-after voice globally. Please join me in welcoming Jamie to today's Fireside Chat. Thank you. So Jamie, let me welcome you once again to Nigeria. I know it's not your first time, so welcome to Abuja, which is the first stop on your tri-nation sub-Saharan African trip. I guess a good place to start will be on geopolitics. Reading, listening, or watching the news today could be very depressing. The Russian-Ukraine war, the deteriorating situation in the Middle East, the rising tension between China and Taiwan, and even just last week, you said, and I quote, recent events show that conditions are treacherous and are getting worse. So my first question is, how worried are you? And how should business leaders manage for situations like this?
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I am thrilled to be here in Nigeria and going to South Africa, Kenya later. We're opening our first branch in Kenya, which we're really happy to do as part of an expansion into Africa, which I think is very important. So we just had our earnings last week, and I did mention that the situation is kind of treacherous. If you look at history of the world, it's probably the most treacherous since World War II. You have a major land war with 1 million casualties in Europe, major armies battling each other. You have terrorism in the Middle East and terrorism around the world. You have Iran, North Korea fostering it. It's quite clear that they're orchestrating with Russia, both against Ukraine and against Israel. And then, of course, and that's a complex situation. And of course, you have America's relationship with China, which is extremely complex and made more complex because of these wars. And so, having said, and I think it's very important for America to have a strong, consistent foreign policy and to make sure that we navigate through this, which I hope we do. But as you know, wars often have different outcomes than people expect, and sometimes when they start, they can be lasting for 5, 6, or 7 years. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us to worry about it. It doesn't stop JP Morgan from expanding. We want to serve clients and serve countries and be respected wherever we do business to help Nigerians in Nigeria and Nigerian companies here, and also Nigerian companies that they go overseas. So we still have expansion plans. So worrying about that doesn't stop us from doing things, but we just have to be very conscious of the risk it creates.
Right. Oh, thank you. But I also know it's not doom and gloom. So what reasons give you the most optimism right now, and how Or what is JP Morgan's approach to risk management in these rather volatile times?
So, again, I love to look at history and read history. So if you look at the history of mankind, it's done pretty well. Over the last, even since the World War II, billions of people have been taken out of poverty. Most countries are developing over time, some with more difficulty than others, and policy really matters inside countries. And technology has cured so many ills and problems. I know the Gates Foundation is here. I think AI will be another round of technology which will probably cure some cancers, and that's kind of an amazing thing. And while sometimes technology is disruptive, it is also the thing that lifts up mankind over many years. So I'm optimistic about the technology. We have to navigate the complex geopolitics, but hopefully mankind will continue to grow, get healthier over time, and good policies and good medicine and good issues will circulate the world. And I'm hoping that America, plays a very healthy part. One of the reasons I'd like to be here is America should play a very healthy part in expanding into Africa, helping African nations, through diplomacy and business and foreign investment, education, all those things which can actually help countries do better.
Thank you. And it's interesting you mentioned technology. So over the last decade, you've seen the rise of neobanks, payment institutions, and the definition of banking, in a sense, has sort of changed in the last 10 years. I guess the question is, how do you see banking and finance industry evolving into the future in the face of disruption and emerging technology?
Yeah. So actually, after this, I'm having a lunch with a lot of the fintech companies here. Technology has been changing banking my whole life. And if you look at certain things we do, if you didn't have mainframes, you wouldn't have mutual funds. It wasn't possible to calculate things that quick. And so, but part of banking will, I always say, ask the first question, what will remain the same? Well, people are going to have to raise money, lend money, move money, hold money for themselves, for businesses. That will stay the same. And banks will play a critical role in that. How that happens will always change. So now you have some great fintech companies here. You have some great fintech companies around the world. But we've always been able to adapt to use technology to do those things for our clients better, faster, cheaper, more efficiently, to use data to help the clients. It is really important to have a healthy financial system. I mean, a financial system is kind of the flywheel for the health of an economy. It allocates capital, it raises money, it gives entrepreneurs money to do things. So wherever I go around the world, where you have a healthy financial system, you usually have a healthy economy. If you don't have a healthy financial system, you usually don't have a healthy economy. So, and whether it's fintech, and I'm never worried about competition, or main banks, we're together. Very often we partner with what you and I would call fintech. But the goal is to do a better job for the client. That client could be an individual, a corporation, the government, the sovereign wealth fund, et cetera.
Right. No, thank you. But how can regulators and financial institutions balance innovation with risk management in this evolving technology space?
Okay, now you ruined my day by mentioning regulations. Regulators, obviously you want a healthy system, and if you don't, and the financial system collapses, it's obviously terrible for a country. So I think it's very reasonable that regulators are always trying to make safety and soundness. But some of the safety and soundness is very basic. A lot of regulations go way beyond that in terms of safety and soundness. And if you look at the United States, we have healthy banks, but the regulations have taken on social causes and a whole bunch of other things which may not work in favor of having a better system. So if I was a regulator, I would always be asking and talking to financial companies about it. What is it that works? What doesn't work? What stops you from banking people? I don't know the banking. I just got here, so I haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of people here and get caught up to date what's happening in your country. But in the United States, a lot of banking regulations have made people unbanked, and we have a hard time describing that to to senators and congressmen and regulators. There's their regulations that drove people out of the banking system, and being in the banking system is a very healthy thing. So I know here like 40% of the people are unbanked. So a lot of the fintech people are trying to reach out to the unbanked. Getting them in the system is a good thing. It's much cheaper for them than being unbanked. It's safer for them. And then also, if we get them in our branch in the United States, we have branches in the United States, and we try to educate everyone about saving money, getting your kid to college, how do you buy a home, some very basic things, but people need to have that kind of financial education, a good job for them. We also do that for small businesses. How do you start a small business? How do you sign a lease? How do you negotiate a contract? So a lot of small business entrepreneurs can get a start. And so regulators should always be thinking, what is it they actually want the outcome to be? Very often it's just, rules and regulations are passed out of anger or simple, ideas, but they actually have the adverse consequence on what you actually want to accomplish.
Right. No, thank you. I guess if I come to Nigeria, JP Morgan has been operating in Nigeria since 1960. Fun fact, actually, we were involved in the setting up of Nigerian textile mills, which is the first major private US business project in Nigeria back in 1960. We've operated a representative office in Nigeria since 1982. We had advised the federal government on a number of initiatives, including the setting up of the NSIA. So we see ourselves as partners in progress with Nigeria. But Jamie, my question is, how integral is Nigeria to the JP Morgan overall strategy, and what is the trajectory from here going forward?
Yeah, so obviously Nigeria is a very large country, probably I think one of the fastest growing populations in the world, and should have a very bright future. So one of the things that JP Morgan does, and when we go to countries, and so I inherited JP Morgan. I've been running the company for a little over 20 years, but being around the world gives us huge knowledge. And that knowledge that we have around Nigeria, so on the way over here, I was reading our research. That research, we educate the world about Nigeria. We educate central banks about Nigeria. We help educate the IMF about Nigeria. And so being here is a very important thing. And what we want to do is be open in more countries in Europe, in Africa, so that over time, the next generation has a footprint here. And when you're here, you actually have much more local knowledge. So you're in Lagos, you know much more about what's going on in Nigeria than I could know sitting in New York City. And we're quite optimistic about the future of Africa. I really do wish that America helped get our companies over here to help Africa, to help grow and expand and bring capital, ideas, technology, et cetera. And that's kind of why we're here. And then we rely on local town, .ou, to make sure we're doing the right things to help your country.
No, thank you. Please clap if you want to. Thank you. Banks in Nigeria have been accused, or sometimes been accused, of making supernormal profits against the background of a weak macro. I think this is not particularly dissimilar to the US. The proverbial tug of war between Wall Street and Main Street. So I guess my question is, how do you balance superlative corporate performance with the well-being of the general populace?
Yeah. So, obviously, if you're not financially healthy, you will fail. So this notion that somehow you are balancing, I don't balance at all. We are going to be a healthy, vibrant bank. The reason we're being a healthy, vibrant bank is so we can serve our customers. And
the bankers are clapping.
Yeah. Well, no, I think we need to do a better job educating the world about the role of a financial system. I don't even know what they mean when they say Wall Street. We bank 80 million Americans. We bank 100 countries. We bank cities, schools, states, hospitals. We bank 12,000 corporations around the world. We bank sovereign wealth funds. We in the United States, we have branches in low-income neighborhoods. We have special products and services. We reach out to all different communities, which we're unabashed about, including in the United States, the Black community, the Hispanic community, et cetera. And so that's what we do. And we have to be healthy and vibrant. And our profits kind of go up or down based upon a lot of different things. There are a lot of businesses where I tell people profits aren't based on what you did this quarter. They're based on what you've been doing over years. We've been here for 60 years, and that's how you earn your respect, earn your trust. And I don't worry as much about short-term fluctuations in profits. But again, and so when they say Wall Street, is that the investor? A lot of veterans own our stock. We think 100 million Americans own our stock. You know, and we're just a piece of the flywheel that lends money to companies, gets entrepreneurs, takes people public. And, you know, like all things, people make mistakes, you know, and we make mistakes, but we try to make all citizens in all countries. And I would hope wherever we are that we're respected for helping that country and those people. And so I think that's true for all things. Like even in business, we have to educate the world. Jobs, capital and jobs are good for countries. Investing is good for a country. All jobs are good. That first job is a dignity job. You know, and when I go around the world, when we get kids jobs, that gives them dignity. It gives them income. That first job is the first rung in the ladder. They often, you know, get promoted and they can form families and buy homes. And so it's just important we get it right. And very often people do things that they think are in the interest of the people, and they destroy countries and companies. And so we have to be very careful how we educate the world about the role of business. I think if business mistreats customers, they should be punished. If business is bad, they should be punished. You know, if business is doing things that don't make it could be any business, but that's not the same thing as just people just angry at companies. You know, free market, free enterprise, since I've been in business, has never been unregulated. We have a heavily, properly regulated free enterprise system, which helps lift people out of poverty. So 2 billion people lifted out of poverty in the last 20 or 30 years. That's extraordinary. However, if you look at the bottom 20% in America, their incomes didn't go up for 20 years. So I understand their frustration. They're right. It's not because JP Morgan did well or not. It's because of our own policies around education, regulation, permitting, healthcare. And so, you know, governments have to say, what's the problem and how do you fix it? And they're always looking for a scapegoat, and I think that is a huge mistake. And, you know, I've made a list of countries. I know you had a speech here earlier from someone from the World Bank. You can make a list of those things that help countries grow. Skills, universities, jobs, foreign investment, domestic investment, you know, making it easy for entrepreneurs to start companies, proper permitting, regulations that don't inhibit companies from growing and things like that. And you can have very healthy countries, and that's what we should all be striving for. And instead of yelling at each other, figure out those policies that work. And often they're not the ones that governments undertake, right, including in the United States, by the way.
Right. Thank you. So we have a lot of business leaders in the room, including some of us that work for you. And we benefit from your advice quite regularly. But could you please share with the audience some of your thoughts on what makes a great leader and how African businesses can apply them?
I mean, so was it with you, how African business can apply what?
Your thoughts on leadership.
Oh, leadership, yeah. You know, I think leadership, I'm going to divide it into 3 parts. It's not really divisible, but, you know, one is, and I've been in, you know, tons of companies that don't get this part right. Analytics, facts, detail, analysis, repeat, rinse, facts, detail, and honest assessment of yourself, what you do well, what you don't do well, what the competition is doing, and constantly doing that. So at JP Morgan, while we've been very successful, we also look at all the mistakes we made, lessons learned from mistakes we made. How come, you know, other companies, you know, ate our lunch in this country or that product or that services? Even in areas where we're number 1 in the world, we're not number 1 in Africa, we may not be number 1 in every country in Asia, we may be number 8 in somewhere in Europe, and there are reasons for that. It could be the quality of your people, it could be your technology, it could be, and that, so we're quite critical and analytical of ourselves. And that's essentially you do. And your people have to do it, and they have to be very honest about it. A lot of companies I go to, they don't have those honest assessments. You know, people are busy telling the boss what the boss wants to hear, and as a corollary to that, it's very important that we all get out, that we all listen to each other. So when I get around and I go to Africa or Europe or even cities around America, I learned a tremendous amount about my own company, my own clients. I can go to any branch, sit down with any teller, and they'll teach me something I don't know about JP Morgan, including something we're doing which is really stupid. And so that's one thing. The second is, I'm going to call it administration, but you got to run it well. You have to be very thoughtful. Do people get things done? So you could be the great analysis, but very often people are a hot mess when it comes to running things. They're not organized, they don't show up on time, they don't have follow-up lists, they don't tell people, they don't delegate properly. And you've seen this, and I've seen it everywhere, where companies, they may be really smart, but they're unable to manage themselves out of a paper bag. But the third is, I think, the most important, for real leadership, is that you earn people's trust and respect. You do not earn people's trust and respect if you are always blaming them, or if you're taking credit for everything. You need people to work who want to work with you because you earn their respect. I've seen a lot of bosses that people don't want to work for. Well, how are you going to build a great company if that's the case? That's true in the military, it's true in government, it's true in business. And to earn people's trust and respect, I think is something they don't talk about a lot in business. It's about your heart. Do you care? People know if you really care or not. It's about your curiosity. Are you always learning? Or is it always that the boss thinks he knows the answer to everything? And those things create trust and respect so that the team around the table speaks up. They contribute. They want to do their share. They're part of that team because at the end of the day, it's that team that's going to get the stuff done. And that's true whether you're talking about technology, branches, countries, and then my job is to support you. So by the end of this day, I'm going to learn a lot from you about what, and I'll ask him later. I always ask local, what more can we do? If you were making decisions, not in New York City, what would you do differently here? And we may find a way to do things better. And so it's a broad set of things: analysis, facts, really tight administration, like run things operationally, and then have enough heart and soul to get out and understand that you don't know everything, and you're not going to do a great job if people don't want to work for you.
So before I sort of open the floor to questions, I've got two personal questions to ask you. One, you're the longest serving CEO within the financial market on Wall Street. What would you say was your worst day in office?
The worst day?
Yes.
I've made plenty of mistakes, so I can go through a whole list of them. And the hardest days weren't when the world was collapsing, the financial crisis, and you're sitting in your office. And I remember we bought Bear Stearns at the request of the United States government, who then fined me another $5 billion for it. But knowing that when we did that we were subjecting our own people to 9 months of literally 12-hour days, 7 days a week to assimilate Bear Stearns, the people, the systems, the risk, to de-risk it, and that's kind of scary. I mean, it leaves you kind of breathless when you do something like that. And of course, there was one other day I'll just mention, since people have such fun with it, I'm sure when I die, they'll put it in my, that he did a great job running JP Morgan, but he did that London whale trading problem. But when I remember, I didn't realize how bad it was until I got back to the office and I went through the actual trades, and I said, my God, we have a real problem. I thought it was a small problem until then. That was a punch in the gut.
Right, no, thank you. I guess the other question is, how is your table tennis going?
How's what?
Your table tennis.
My table, oh.
Right.
So we have a guy, one of our guards in New York City, Musa,
Musa,
who was your tennis tabletop tennis ping pong champion, and he plays all the time with a great friend of mine. And so Musa, if you're watching this, hello from Nigeria, and I do play tabletop tennis still. I'm not as good as Musa, of course, but
right. No, thank you very much, Jamie. I guess I will open the floor for a few questions. I see Aikioke. Aikioke, please.
Good afternoon, Jamie. And thank you for a very enriching conversation. My name is Ike Chioke. I'm the Group Managing Director of AfriInvest, an investment banking firm based here. And I also have the distinction of having worked in Wall Street at Goldman Sachs many years ago. My question is this. In view of the long-standing relationship between JP Morgan and Nigeria, and given all you've spoken about, and that what talked about establishing business here in the 60s, and also given all the American businesses operating in Nigeria, when can we expect JP Morgan to set up a full-fledged bank in Nigeria?
answer that question. I just got here. I think it's a great question. As a matter of fact, I was asking earlier about our licenses and our plans here and things like that. So I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did, but you might.
We will pack that for next time.
But wherever we do business, we slowly expand. Clients, lending, payments, foreign investment, et cetera. We just always expand. We're almost always in an expansion mode.
I guess the next question will go to Amina Maina, please. Right here.
Hi, my name is Amina Maina, and I'm the Group Chief Operating Officer of a company called MRS Holdings. We're an oil and gas company, but I sit here as the third Vice Chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. And my question to you really is with regards to the vantage point which you sit on, which you hold, and what would you say about global capital today? Because recently there's been a lot of conversations around global capital, but particularly as it flows towards sub-Saharan Africa. What can you tell us? But what would you also say would be the key drivers for FDIs? Thank you.
Yeah. So there's no mystery to that. Capital goes to where it's taken care of, where people think they can make some money and have a return on capital in the long run. And very often countries, I'm not talking about Nigeria, if they have very inconsistent policies, companies don't want to go there. And the real capital is going to come from companies. So I think we in America could do a much better job in what I call development finance. If you look at our development finance institutions, we could double or triple that, and I think we should. And as they grow, JP Morgan will double or triple our investment in the development banks. But the real capital is private capital. It's companies around the world. It might be sovereign wealth funds. And they want to come here for investment opportunity. So, to do that, consistent laws, consistent regulations, consistent rules, consistent legislation, consistent legal environments, you will get plenty of capital here. But it's got to be consistent because in a lot of countries, when the legal environment flips back and forth and the government flips back and forth, people are just afraid to make those investments. And, our investment, when we try to do it, at least since I've been to JP Morgan, we've never left the country. Once we go, we get better and smarter, and then we try to enhance what we do here. But those rules to get capital are pretty basic everywhere.
Right. Thank you. Yes, one more question for IJ Ojeneme. She's there? Right.
Thank you very much. My name is EJ Onejeme.
Right.
I'm with Veranda Energy. My question is this. The global financial architecture has long been creditor-centric. For borrowers, sovereign lines of credit come at a premium and have unsustainably expensive terms for repayment. Consequently, low and middle-income countries run their economies having large development finance gaps in a financial system that does not accommodate their development needs. On the other side, creditors have an established practice of convening, coordinating, and aligning positions on debt treatment. Stretching as far back as the 1950s, creditors like the Paris Club and London Club have gathered to discuss and resolve debt repayment challenges faced by borrowers. So my question, Mr. Diamond, is do you think we need a borrowers club in Africa to match geopolitics of financial architecture? Thank you.
I would answer that by saying not really. That won't solve the issue. The issue is, like certain countries have gone bankrupt 10 or 15 times. For capital to flow, it's got to be sustainable. And so you need really sustainable policies. But I do think that like I've already mentioned, the IMF, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, that we could do a lot better in. In fact, I met, next week is the IMF in DC, and last year I met with all these development banks, and one of the things that surprised me is how small they are relative to the needs of the world. And they could actually be the capital that brings in other capital. So what will bring in a lot of capital is projects that are successful. And roads, bridges, ports, tunnels, mines, that's what's going to bring in capital. And if you have a borrowers club that's going to negotiate, that won't bring in capital. That'll just help you make up for mistakes. And so I'm not against doing something like that. But I think we could do a much better job, literally bringing more capital into Africa. I think America could do a better job getting American businesses here. America's own regulations sometimes make it harder to do business here. And I'll give you for example, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. I'm for it. It's a very important thing. It helps countries have standards and things like that. But if an American company makes a mistake, the punishment is so high that any board of directors will always be asked the question, why are you going there? If you make a mistake, the criminal penalties can far dwarf what went wrong. And so I think it's just a lot more we can do. And we've taken it upon ourselves to try to double our own effort in development finance.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I guess we just have some time for you to give your closing remarks in terms of your view of the meeting today and what you expect from Nigeria going forward.
Say it again?
Your closing remarks.
Oh, conclusion. Well, I just got here. I'm going to know a lot more about Nigeria and maybe some of the things by the time I leave here, but I am thrilled to be here. I had wanted to expand in Africa 10 years ago, and you may not know this, but my own government stopped me. Because it was after the crisis, and they said banks are risky, and they didn't want us adding risk. They were wrong. They didn't hurt J.P. Morgan. They hurt Africa. By now, we've probably had 6 or 7 additional countries. So we bank, I think you told me, 14 countries in Africa, but we want people on the ground. There's nothing like local knowledge and local people and local research that can enhance us and help the flow of business between, in this case, Nigeria and the rest of the world. Remember, when we educate people in Nigeria, that education goes to China, Europe, Latin America, and the United States, not just the United States. And so I'm thrilled to be here. I hope that we expand over the years and that, that people who succeed me, they'll inherit something in Africa and help them grow for another 100 years here.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, NSG, for inviting us.
I think that applause can indeed be louder. And of course, let's make it lusty. This has been rich, powerful, and indeed insightful. We'll take a group picture, both of you. We'll take a picture of both of you. And I would also like to respectfully invite all board members at the Nigeria Economic Summit Group to please come up stage. Thank you. While we're waiting for them, the compere will join them for a group picture. Privilege. Thank you. And so we'll have our incredible board members at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Thank you so much, Jamie Dimon, for coming to this 30th Economic Summit. We don't take it for granted. We are super thrilled to have you. Thank you for lending your voice to this cause and for sharing from your deep well of wisdom and knowledge today. Thank you.